Okay, so here we go again. This is the Ohlins front strut assembly with the spring. So the order of things to go is, first, this is a plastic spring seat, goes into your over your adjuster. This sits over here. The next thing you do is put the rubber boot on to the shock absorber. Just make sure it's snug, it just settles there. Just make sure it's nice and snug so it meets fully with the plate over here. Just push it down till it's there. That's one part done. Then the spring. The spring, remember, the Ohlins has to face upwards. So it has to be the right way around. So Ohlins, this is how it should be. So then the spring goes in here over the adjuster. Settle the spring down over here. Then you have this rubber washer that goes on top of the spring. Then you have this metal ring which has no cuts on it. That goes over the rubber washer and acts as a spring seat. Then you have this plastic bearing thing. This plastic bearing goes over the metal piece with no cuts in it. And then finally your metal piece with a cut in it which goes into your top mount, that goes on top like this. Okay, just 1 second. This is okay, that's done. Then you have this metal washer which is the same size as this, just goes and sits on top of that. Then whatever top mount you're using, if you're using the OEM top mount, you're going to use the OEM top mount. I'm using the 0341, so I'll just... Okay, so let's look at assembling the top mount over here. So normally when you get in normal cars, you'll just get these parts. This is a rubber seat, this is a metal ring, this is a plastic bearing, this is a metal ring, and this is a spacer, and this is a locking another spacer and the top nut. So the way this goes is the rubber ring goes on top of the plastic ring. Remember, this metal ring is actually doesn't have a cut in it. Then this metal ring and the plastic rubber seal goes on top of the plastic bearing over here, and this bearing goes onto the metal ring with the notch. This notch matches to your top mount notch. Now if you have a OEM top mount, this will be plastic and it'll have a notch over here. So this notch matches this notch, and that's how you assemble the top mount. So now this is the steering bearing which is going to move, and then you put that assembly on top of your coilover like this. And before you do that, put this big ring over here on top of this. Then the entire assembly goes on top. Then the washer goes on top like this. The round part is on the top, the flat part is on the bottom, and then you put the nut on. So let's do that. So yeah, the top mount, be it rubber or metal, matches the cut. This cut is in the big ring. Then you have the plastic washer, plastic bearing, then you have the metal bearing, then you have the rubber isolator, then you have the spring, and then you have a plastic spring seat over here. That is the order of things. And then on top you have this washer which is curved on one side and flat on the other. The flat side goes towards the top mount over here, the curved side remains on top. And then you have a lock nut, you put the lock nut in, and you have assembled your front strut assembly. So quickly once again, remember, metal rings adjusting for the spring seat, plastic washer, spring, boot, dust boot cover, rubber spring seat, metal bearing without a cut, plastic bearing, metal bearing with the cut, and the OEM top mount or aftermarket top mount that you're going to use. Then the round washer with the flat smoothened side facing downwards, and the locking nut on top. Okay, so everything except for this piece is there with you in the Ohlins kit. So once you put the top head assembly together and put all the washers in place, you put a Allen key over here and a wrench over here, and then countersink it and tighten it. The torque is I think 30 Nm as per the manual, So shouldn't be too much hand tightening it, and then I'll use a torque wrench when I go to the garage to install this properly. Yep, and it's tightened fully. I just got to go to the garage and use a torque wrench to tighten this to 30 mm. But yeah, there's no movement, and wow, this steering bearing is a piece of work, particularly because you assemble it yourself. And that's the one front shock assembled. Just be careful when you're assembling these kind of shocks not to stand it up, because the adjustment thing is over here in the bottom. So you don't want to break that or put any pressure on that for the valves. Other than that, yep, we are good to go. Right, folks, so the front struts have assembled. I have to torque this down when I get to the shop to install them. This is supposed to be a 30 Nm, I think. I'll do that. The top strut bearing has been assembled. The spring perch is okay. You got the rubber spring seat in the plastic spring seat in the bottom, rubber spring seat in the top, and the coilover. Just be careful about these adjusting knobs because they're in the bottom of the shock. So that's it. Left, right, both are installed. Both have these camber plates. They're off center slightly, so I get a bit more camber. But yeah, fronts are assembled. The rear, there isn't much to assemble if you ask me. You just have to put the dust boots on and then mount them as it is. So, alright people, this is the rear Ohlins setup. This is the order of which things go. This is your rear shock absorber. It mounts upside down. The dust boot is cut from the top, so they give you this dust boot. You put it on the shock absorber. It sits over here. So this part sits right above the adjusting ring over here. You zip tie it down and use these spacers inside over here on either side of the shock absorber to mount to your rear control arm. This thing mounts your rear control arm. Then the rubber boot, zip tie. Then going on top, this is a rubber bushing. Remember, this is a kind of a T-shaped bushing. So the fat part goes into your strut mount and the thin part goes on top onto your strut. So the fatter side of this rubber bush goes inside your rear strut mount, and the thinner part goes over your strut over here. Now, these two are interesting because depending on the kind of strut mount that you have, strut top mount you have on your car, there is apparently a 10 millimeter mount and a 12 millimeter mount. So this is for the 10 millimeter mount. If you have the 10 millimeter mount, you're good. So you just use this ring inside your strut mount and then put the lock nut on. Remember, this lock nut has a locking ring on it. I don't know if you can see it. Let me see. Yeah, so you can see. So this thing goes top down like this. The metal movable part locking ring is always on top. And if you have the 12 millimeter strut top, you have this additional spacer which reduces it to a 10 millimeter, and that goes. So it's either the 10 millimeter spacer or the 12 millimeter spacer, depending on what kind of strut mount you have in the back. So that takes care of your rear. Now the spring seat is very simple. This thing is upside down on the car. This is from the top. So first thing you do is put the smaller locking ring in. Hang on a second, this should go in. I think it's the other way around. Yeah, working with one hand is difficult. But yeah, so the smaller ring goes on top, inside. Then you have the bigger ring. Then you have the plastic reduced spring isolator. And then you have the spring. Remember, the spring Ohlins should always face the right direction. So this string would sit like this on the car. Let me assemble this top mount, and I can't do it with one hand, and I'll show you guys how the spring will sit. So now that we got the spring seat adjustment set, so remember, so the small ring, big ring, then you have your rubber, this is a plastic spring spacer, and this is how it goes inside your car. This is the top, this goes to your top body, this part sits on your lower control arm. And the Ohlins label is always facing the right way. If you put the spring the other way around, I don't think it will make a difference, but they insist on the instruction that this is the right way up. So yeah, so that's how the rear looks, and then you have the shock absorber on your control arm. Okay, so that's it. That's as much as I can assemble without taking apart my car. So once I am done, once I take apart, once this COVID wave is gone down a little bit, I'll go to the workshop and do it. I already have the front shocks assembled, so as we did a bit earlier. The rear you can't really assemble much other than the boot, and after that we have to put it on the car. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed. Let's see how she rides once I put these on.